Krishnamoorthi of Illinois. Of course, he sits on the Intelligence Committee. So, look, I mean, this is a classified briefing. I get that. I also know our reporting, Washington Post reporting, New York Times reporting on this. So what can you share with me about how you saw that meeting go down?
I can't comment on the specifics of the briefing, but what I can say is that, unfortunately, I think folks on the other side still have not internalized some of the conclusions from 2016, namely that the Russians interfered in that election on the president's behalf, and ever since then, members of the intelligence community have uniformly said that the Russians are planning to interfere in our 2020 elections. And I think that they're under a lot of pressure from their president to somehow change the narrative about 2016, and also to say that the Russians may not be interfering in the current elections. And that's a big problem because we have to prevent them from doing so.
Okay. I understand you can't share any of the classified information with us, but you can shed light on the response from your colleagues. Who got upset in that briefing and why?
Again, I can't get into the specifics of what they said or their responses, but again, what I can say is that, after this briefing, it appears, based on reports, that the president is trying to interfere in the intelligence community's assessment of what's going on with regard to the Russian threat. And that's precisely what we have to guard against. We can't have the president or anyone interfering in their assessment because it cannot be a political process. They have to be truth tellers in this.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's quite an allegation. So what are you going to do about it?
I think, obviously, there's going to be further discussions going forward. I think that, I don't want to get ahead of Chairman Schiff, but he definitely is this type of person that will follow up to try to make sure that we protect the integrity of our elections. Mm-hmm. Again, it's not about whether the Russians are going to help one side or the other. It's that they're going to interfere, not only the Russians, but potentially other adversaries. And so we have to do everything we can on both sides to unify against them.
Let me get your take on some reporting that is different from what the Times and the Washington Post put out there that our Jake Tapper got, and that is from a security official within the administration who says that Shelby Pearson, who's the person who came in and briefed you guys, may have mischaracterized the intelligence that Russia had developed a preference for the president a little bit. Let me quote from that. Quote, "A more reasonable interpretation," this official says, "of the intelligence is not that they have a preference. It's a step short of that. It's more that they understand the president is someone they can work with. He's a deal maker, but not that they prefer him over Senator Sanders or Mayor Buttigieg or anyone else." Was that your read?
Again, I can't comment on the specifics of what she said on those topics. However, what we do know is that the reason why the Russians interfered in 2016 to try to get Trump elected as president is because they viewed him as a deal maker, someone that they could do business with. And as you could see from the Helsinki summit, he's also somebody that they view that's favorable to them because he would rather credit Vladimir Putin's information over the intelligence community's information about the Russians. And so that is in part why they wanted to help him in 2016. We just have to make sure at this point that they just don't get involved. Here in Illinois, by the way, Poppy, we were on the front lines of the Russian attack on the 2016 elections because they actually viewed tens of thousands of Illinois voter records. They fished for it, and they got it. And so we're especially sensitive about this topic, and I hear about this at town hall meetings all the time.
Yeah. Well, look, there are things that have been put forward that could help, at least those who support it say could help against this, like the SHIELD Act, for example. Let me get your read on the New York Times reporting. Part of what struck me at the end of their report last night was that they said that, and I quote here, "Since the impeachment inquiry, tensions have risen between the ODNI and the committee. As officials navigate the disputes, the intelligence agencies have slowed the amount of material they provide the House." Is that true?
I know that during the impeachment inquiry and then subsequently there was a concern about this. And this goes again to that question that is arising in a lot of people's minds, which is the intelligence community being affected by the pressure that President Trump is putting on the entire administration to almost whitewash Russian involvement, not only in 2016, but potentially 2020. And you hear from my colleagues on the other side these displays of support for the president's theories about how maybe the Ukrainians interfered in 2016, not the Russians. And why would the Russians want to interfere at all? And those types of displays of support for the president's theories are not only unhelpful, but they hurt our ability to prevent the Russians from interfering again.
I will say there are some Republican members of Congress who have called the president on that and said that's just not true, Mr. President, which is right. Important to have facts there. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you.